There is a very specific class system in North Korea, and the basis of that class system is your loyalty, or it could be the loyalty of your grandparents to the Kim family regime. So if your grandfather, who fought in the Korean War 6.5 decades ago, and he deserted, for example, and went to South Korea, or he did something that was not helpful to the regime, then you, as the grandchild of that person that showed a lack of loyalty, would perhaps be living in a far distant province, far away from the capital, and you might not even have a chance to study beyond the middle school. And you would very possibly be chosen to be a miner in one of the mines for the rest of your life. So this is just one example of the class system that is very strictly controlled and naturally violates freedom of movement, freedom of choice among North Koreans. So, just as one small example of one of our projects, we've tried all different kinds of food aid projects from when we started in 1996. One we call the Ton a Month Club, sending corn to orphanages, to small kindergartens, wherever we could find a place to kind of surgically insert it from the China border. And then we moved to helping someone who had a bakery. One bakery was in China on the border, another bakery was inside North Korea itself. That worked for a while, but then that individual ran afoul of the authorities and had to discontinue that, so we needed to go to something else. So we decided to try rice crackers. Rice crackers, for those of you who are familiar with Rice Krispies, anyway, it's a way of turning nutritious, high nutrition rice into crackers, and then we would send those into North Korea. Why would we do that? Well, one, the shelf life of these rice crackers was longer than ordinary rice. Second, those that were recipients of these rice crackers, they were large discs, didn't have to boil rice from the beginning, which would take maybe 45 minutes to an hour ordinarily. These rice crackers were already cooked in China, and so that when we sent them to North Korea, those who were on the lowest tier of the class system and who had limited heating oil and cooking oil as well as limited food would only have to boil the water and then put the dry rice crackers in it, and that would save on their heating fuel, as precious as it was. Then the North Korean authorities caught on to what we were doing. So they began stopping our rice crackers from going in last year in one main entry point of North Korea. So the thought occurred to us, what if we started to smuggle, I know you're going to laugh, what if we smuggle vegetable seeds into North Korea? So you would think, well, that's ridiculous. I mean, why would you have to smuggle something as innocuous as vegetable seeds? The point is, all food aid, all humanitarian food assistance in North Korea, if it's in large amounts, is going to be redistributed according to government requirements and government discrimination. So if you send in tons and tons of food, that's going to naturally draw attention of the North Korean authorities. And naturally, most of that food will be funneled to those who are on the top level, the most loyal. And that means urban citizens, oftentimes citizens of Pyongyang. So we tried, and this is thanks very much to students, high school students, university students. We began to toy with the idea of what about buying seeds in bulk and then just packaging these seeds in very tiny plastic envelopes with a tiny little label on it, what it is, how deep to plant it, what months to plant it, and it's enough for one family. And then just package those by the thousands. And then have them couriered in and then redistributed. Well, that project is about 1 year old, and much to our surprise, even though we're in the middle of a very high tension due to missile tests going on, nuclear bomb tests going, my wife just wrote me this morning from Seoul saying that the North Korean regime just sent up another ballistic missile on the east coast of North Korea. So this is going on. Nevertheless, in the last 3 or 4 months, we've been able to distribute these vegetable seeds to 4 different provinces. Admittedly, it's not tons and tons and tons, but what it is are packaged vegetable seeds that are geared for maximum trickle down in order to be handed out through friends and relatives and villagers to be enough for one family to get spinach, to get corn, to get various other types of inexpensive vegetables. So you might ask, well, how do you know that actually that's what the people deeply inland need? Well, we had a very interesting confirmation of that just about 6 months ago. My wife and I were visiting one of the border areas, and we were visiting a long-term friend of ours who is a North Korean refugee still living in China. We had a secret meeting with her, and really the intention of this meeting was not to talk about seeds. It was to talk about her child and the different circumstances, etc. But in the process, we mentioned to her this new pilot project that we had about smuggling seeds into North Korea. And she said, that's very interesting. I had a conversation on the telephone. Sometimes North Korean refugees can use a Chinese cell phone to reach inland into North Korea, maybe the first 20 or 30 kilometers or miles before the mountains start. So, of course, the North Koreans have to speak very carefully and secretively when they do that. But she said, my sister told me that the government is easing up a little bit in distributing a little bit of land to us. She said, but we don't have seeds to plant. And I thought, hey, this is fantastic. We seem to be maybe on the right track here. And so we're hoping to be able to expand this smuggling of vegetable seeds. And if you are interested, for example, this, if you want to make a note of the title, this is actually an article written by one of the members, one of our volunteers. She wrote up a description of how this project came about and sent it into Huffington Post. And you can find this very good article by Rachel Stein in Huffington Post. Okay, that's the food situation. Wherever you have malnutrition, wherever you have chronic malnutrition over a long period of time, and I'm no doctor, I'm not a medical specialist in any way, but you're going to have a deteriorating immune system of the entire population. And sure enough, as you can see here on the left, There are very frequent outbreaks of tuberculosis, scarlet fever, typhoid, paratyphoid, and various types of fevers that go along very tragically with these periods of extreme malnutrition. Another problem in North Korea is that there has not been a consistent reforestation program. So if you look at the right panel of this slide, you will see at a distance, I mean, this is a time of flooding, but one of the things that makes the flooding even worse is that there are very few trees left on the mountainsides and the hillsides. So that means that when it rains, the topsoil, the most fertile topsoil, is washed away. And so this is making planting, this is making agriculture even more difficult and more desperately dependent on fertilizers, chemical fertilizers, of which there aren't enough in North Korea either. These are satellite images of some of the prison camps inside North Korea. Some of these prison camps are as large as medium-sized cities. One of them is as large as Houston, Texas. This is one prison camp. These two satellite images, one of Kaechon, number 14, and one of Yodok prison, which is a total control zone. That means people, for the most part, do not ever leave that location. Prison camps include entire families. Let's say that you have been at a drinking party with somebody on a Saturday night, and after you've had a few too many cups of the local rice wine, you say something somewhat critical of the government. Heaven forbid if you say something actually using the name of the Kim leader, Kim Jong-un now. If that is heard and reported by one of your drinking partners, that would be cause enough for you, and not only you, by the way, you, your wife, your children, and your parents to go to that prison camp. It's called a 3-generational punishment system. Because of that, you can get an idea as to the extent and the sheer size of the North Korean prison system. Unfortunately, torture and inhumane treatment are common. How do we provide humanitarian assistance in a case like this? You will notice that in this slide there are drawings of what goes on inside those prisons. There are occasions when it's possible, and I'm sorry I can't give you the details, but it's possible on occasion to assist former prisoners from this particular prison, Cheonggori prison, which is not a total control zone, to be able to escape North Korea, and then after escaping North Korea, to assist them to pass through third countries in order to eventually come to South Korea. And because of their escape, successful escape, it has been possible to gain vital information about the treatment of prisoners inside North Korean prison camps and other detention centers. So these drawings were actually made by a former inmate of Cheonggori prison. On one occasion, I was able to meet one of these prisoners in Thailand after he had been guided safely out the thousands of miles that it takes to cross from northeast China all the way down into Southeast Asia. The effort to try to help North Korean refugees to safety has been referred to by some academics and by some journalists as the so-called Underground Railroad. May I ask how many of you have heard that term? The Underground Railroad, as it pertains to United States history, is actually the human network in the middle of the 19th century, 1850s, 1860s, to assist American slaves out of the slave states of the South into the northern states where they were treated as free men and women. So that underground so-called human network of safe houses, people who guide them, has been used in reference to Northeast Asian attempt, largely by volunteers, in order to assist North Koreans to get not so much out of North Korea. That is their decision to be able to vote with their feet. But once they go to other countries, be it Russia, be it China in particular, because that border is much longer than it is with Russia and North Korea, they're faced with thousands of kilometers of difficulties, dangers, and challenges in order to make it to safety. If they are detected and caught by local authorities in the PRC, they are forcibly repatriated to North Korea. That forcible repatriation can include long-term imprisonment, the kind of beating that you saw in the other picture. But unfortunately, for some North Korean women refugees who have fallen into human trafficking traps in China and happen to be pregnant with a child, and I don't mean to say this happens in every case, but there have been far too many recorded cases where it has happened, so I cannot ignore it. But if a North Korean refugee woman who is pregnant and is unmarried to a North Korean man, and it is assumed that the child has been fathered by a Chinese man, then that woman, if she's forcibly repatriated, is subject to forced abortion, having to do with the reason being that part of the North Korean narrative is that they are a pure race and therefore they cannot be mixed and mingled with other nationalities. So that is another very sobering and extraordinarily serious danger that are faced by North Korean refugees. When you come across a situation, as you undoubtedly will, if you haven't already, in your life, where you find yourself riveted to the shocking denial of human rights or brutal treatment of individuals, I guess all of us are faced with a decision: what are we going to do about it? And not only what are we going to do about it, but like David said so eloquently yesterday, and others have said it too, I would simply echo, not only what are we going to do about it, but what am I going to do about it? How is it going to affect my life? What am I going to tell my grandchildren when they ask me, hey, Grandpa, what did you do when you learned about this? So I'm of the belief, now I've been doing this for 20 years, but I did other work similar for 20 years before that, so I'm a real old-timer. But I'm of the belief that it's impossible to make a sacrifice. It's impossible to make a sacrifice. Whatever you give is going to come back in some way or another to enrich your life beyond your wildest dreams. So when you come to these stark decisions, I want to urge you to remember that it's in some ways impossible to make a sacrifice. You will be paid so richly in so many ways, human relationships and far, far beyond that. So I'm going to part with one last little section of a poem. There's only one life. It'll soon be past. I can testify to that, being 66. Only what's done in love and for others will last. And I hope I can just leave you with that thought. If you have any questions, I'm sorry I've probably drawn down too long. Ben, yes. Go ahead.
So hi, my name is Mai and I'm representing Vietnam. I have a question that, do you think that the North Koreans should be encouraged to escape from North Korea and like receive the refugees policies support from other countries, or should we just try to produce some projects like you were stated before and try to educate them and help them in other ways?
When you say our country, what do you mean?
Other countries. I mean, should North Koreans be encouraged to become refugees and receive the support from other refugee policies from other countries?
Frankly speaking, as I mentioned in my talk, we are not really involved in encouraging North Koreans from inside North Korea to make any decision one way or the other. But what we have found is that so many North Koreans already have this idea that they want to escape and find freedom. So the help that is being offered to them is after they have made the decision that they want to vote with their feet, so to speak, and go to another place and start a life somewhere else. So once they have made that decision on their own, of their own volition, then I'm strongly of the belief that those neighboring countries and the entire world should respond in the way that has been mandated by the UN in order to protect refugees who are facing fear of punishment or persecution if they're sent back. So that's a UN principle, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Great question.
May we please have the question for mic number 2?
Hello, I'm Andrew from Australia.
Yes.
So, it is incredibly difficult for many people to buy into the overwhelming crisis that you have presented today because, to an important extent, these human rights violations occur everywhere, like the United States and like Australia, like the oppression of Indigenous communities and indefinite detention centres. It is also difficult for people to recognize the apparent magnitude of these issues when, the United States has historically been politically and ideologically opposed to communism and other forms of governing that doesn't conform to the Western world's idea of what is right. So with these difficulties in mind, how do you separate yourself from the politically charged debate when identifying yourself as an American and as the founder and director of this program? Because I find this stigma might damage your altruistic message and may seem like an advancement of a political message instead of solely a humanitarian approach.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Well, frankly speaking, I think that's one of the reasons that the UN Commission of Inquiry's report is so extremely valid, because the report represents the evaluation of all member states of the United Nations. This was not a report that was mandated or written or documented or even led by any American. In fact, it was led by an Australian. So the very fact that this UNCOI report, which was completed 2 years ago, came to such stark and very dramatic conclusions based on evidence gathered over a one-year period. I feel that that this makes the situation inside North Korea of an independent and neutral basis simply based on UN principles and not based on any political persuasion. If somehow you got the impression that this was an American talk, I apologize. That was certainly not my intention. But I certainly echo the findings of the COI report and the severity of them. But I frankly have no political capital in any of this. So, but thank you. That was an excellent question.
Thank you.
How's it going? I'm Thomas DeMayo. I'm from the United States of America. First of all, I wanted to say thank you for what you do and for bringing more news and that to this topic. I know it's a very important one. In my lifetime, Americans such as former Governor Bill Richardson and more recently Dennis Rodman have gone to North Korea to begin talks with Korean government officials. Do you foresee these talks going in the right direction as a step forward as we are beginning to have conversations? And do you see the solution being an internal one within North Korea or with other states in the area helping the process?
In terms of the North Korean regime, etc.?
Yes.
Quite honestly, as a humanitarian, I don't have a dog in that fight. I honestly don't. I don't know what is best. My tiny little NGO doesn't have an international relations arm to it, so to speak. I'm being facetious, but quite honestly, I really don't know. It seems like what's been happening up till now doesn't work. So the response I feel is we have to simply help the people who have been denied their human rights. So for that reason, our projects of helping the refugees, of sending in seeds or rice crackers or helping the orphans of trafficked women, to me, that is the most meaningful response. But the answer to your question is above my pay grade. So I honestly don't know. And I even hesitate, even out of respect, out of the gentleman who just asked his question, I think it's better I don't even go there. But I hope that somehow or another, that the 20+ million people of North Korea could see the sunshine of freedom and have their human rights restored to them as soon as possible.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.